certainly appreciate the opportunity again to be with you and to moderate this excellent panel and the participation. It's great to have the room full. Last year we were down below and someone didn't like the lighting in there, and so now we moved up here. I won't tell you who that someone was. It's the same one that was up on the stage with me a few minutes ago. I guess she gets what she wants. That's all I can say. So this room has plenty of lighting, right? And it's airy, and the ceilings are just right. So we're going to proceed with this. Again, appreciate the opportunity and when putting together some thoughts about today and the Achievement Award winners, and as I spoke earlier, I really believe, and the group in general, I think that this is about the Achievement Award winners and what you're able to do and what you're accomplishing and what you're going to accomplish. And I think that's vitally important. And I know that there's a lot of humble people in the room. I talked to a few of the winners already from the counties that I've met over the years and have the privilege and honor to work with. And of course, you always get the same old story. Well, what we're doing ain't really that special. Well, I'm here to tell you that it is special. And, you should be recognized for that. And the fact that this room is full and everyone's here is evidence enough, I believe, that people want to hear some of the things that you've got going on. And you throw that atmosphere that we're going to have here, and then you throw in someone like Alan Williams, who this morning, I believe, hit it out of the park for us. And I think we're in for a real treat here for the next hour, hour and a half, or, I don't know how long you want to stay here, but, and so I think good things can become of this, much like it did last year when we had James Rogers, and we were able to have some of the Achievement Award winners open up and really tell their story and ask the questions, and of course have an expert elaborate and give their thoughts and ideas going forward. So again, I appreciate everyone being here. We're going to keep this really simple. We brought up 5 chairs to start. If we need to bring up more, that would be great. If we need to take some away, we certainly can do that. But I was given a list earlier of some of the winners from Area 1 that might be in attendance, and if I don't specifically list you and you are from Area 1 and you are a Conservation Achievement Award winner, by all means come forth if you'd like. But I think we'll start with Area 1. We have Cavalier County, and again, this is just alphabetical order. We have Brian and Barb Cram, and if they're here and if they'd like to come forward, they certainly can. If we're fine. And we have Eddy County is in Area 1. Do we have anyone from Eddy County? And if you're a supervisor or maybe even a producer from that area and you'd like to come forward and say some things, that would be fine too as well. So don't be shy. Somebody's got to take the first step. So, and then we have Foster County. Is anyone here from Foster County? Jeremiah and Angela Blana? Are they?
Went to the other.
They're at the mall?
No. They went to the farm loan discussion. They'll be joining us later.
Okay, well, we can bring them up then if they're willing to. That would be excellent. How about Grand Forks County? Ben and Misty, are you here? Come on up, Ben. Thank you. Appreciate that. I read up a little bit on Ben and Misty's operation, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Pembina County, is there anyone from Pembina here? Pembina is the Brunbaugh. Thank you for coming up. How about Ramsey County? Anyone from Ramsey here would like to be on the panel? Come forward. Walsh County? Anyone from Walsh County here? And we have Wells County. Ann Heaney, I know, is from Wells County. Al's been around a long time. Well, so, is there anyone else from Area 1 that would like to participate? Absolutely, come on forward. That's all right. Okay. So here we go. Keep in mind, I'm not too familiar with the outside. You're from Eddy County, you said?
Yes, just a tree plant.
No, that's fine. Oh, okay, Chance Price.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Okay. Well, so we have Chance Price up here, and again, I didn't know Chance would be in attendance, but Chance has, he's done a lot with his farmstead and planted a lot of trees. He actually works, has another off the farm as well. And you have some acreage, but your brother-in-law farms it, okay? And of course, you're seeing lots of birds and wildlife and things like that happen with the tree plantings and things like that.
It works. I can
So-
tell my story.
Pardon?
I could tell my story.
Absolutely. Why don't you start, Chance, and tell your story?
Sure, that might be simpler. Yeah, we purchased some ground in 2004. I worked for a utility company, farm background. My brother-in-law farms the land. And I started planting trees in the non-crop areas, which my youngest one doesn't care for. He thinks we should farm everything, but started planting trees anywhere from 100 to 500 trees a year since 2004. Doing a lot of soil conservation's planted some for me. I've done a lot on my own of the last couple of years. Probably plant 15 to 20 different varieties of trees every year. It's been a learning process, the wet areas, the dry areas, what grows here and what doesn't grow there. So I've done a lot of experimenting and done a lot of different things with the tree tubes. I'll cut the tree tubes in half so it costs a little less. And then I take like the fabric, I cut the sections in halves and 3-foot squares. It seems like I have a little better luck with fabric around the trees versus just planting the trees, depending on the willows or whatnot. But I've got one area that it's a glorified slough, and I've got 3 kids, a daughter and 2 boys. And when the kids were little, in the wife, we'd all go plant trees in the spring, and every year I'd tell my wife that this was the last year I was going to plant trees, and every year I'd plant trees again. I named this slough Lake Brianna after my daughter, and one of my boys, we were standing looking over the slough. They're both little eating their lunch, and my one said to me, "Dad, this isn't fair. Why does Brianna get a lake and we don't?" So I've dubbed little channels off this slough. I've got the Caden Bay, and I got the Preston Forest. But it's been a joy planting trees, and I've said should plant a tree today for somebody tomorrow to enjoy, I guess.
Well, that's a great attitude, a great talk, First off, I guess, did you tell your one child too that sometimes life isn't fair? Because that's what my dad would have told me, but I'm not saying that that's right, but I guess I have some questions, just a couple observations, and I think we'll go through everyone, and then we'll have Alan come up if that would work best. But have you experimented with orchards, orchard type? And of course, the emphasis now, of course, and many of you know this, is pollinators. My background is in trees. That's kind of where I got my start. 20-some, well, it's over 1995, I think. But now the emphasis is on pollinators, and in North Dakota, we have lots of early pollinators in the tree world. Most of you tree planters know this. And we have some mids, and we have very few late pollinators because of the soil types and things that happen here. And that's become more of an emphasis now. Chad Thorson, our windbreak conservationist, knows about those things, and some things to think about when you're choosing your species going forward. And maybe you can supplement some trees with some different types of forbs or legumes or grasses or something like that. But
Yeah, for the most part, I've kind of went on my own, so I'm, and I'm always looking for advice too from anybody. But it has been fun, just experimenting with the trees and trying to figure out what grows and what doesn't. I'm just kind of getting more into the fruit trees and stuff the last couple of years. Doggle, apple, I think I've planted them, started planting them 4 or 5 years ago, and them all seem to be doing pretty well. Box elders do well, Black Hills do well. Russian olive will grow anywhere. Green ash grow anywhere. Nannyberry, plum trees, just trying to think of some of the other fruit trees. Dogwoods, I planted a lot of them in 2008, 2009, 2010, and I didn't think they were going to do anything, and now this last couple of years, it seems like they're really starting to take off. And I see a lot of doves and nesting birds and that, so.
that's the other thing to consider is what type of wildlife you'll bring in and things like that. So.
And that's what I'm trying to do is cater more, I'm trying to get more stuff to keep more pheasants and grouse and doves and, nesting for that kind of thing now.
Sure. Well, thanks, Chance. I appreciate you stepping forward and coming up, and we'll maybe hear from Chance a little later after Alan says. Let's go to the gentleman on the end. And he's the supervisor from Cavalier County. Well, welcome and thank you for participating.
Yes, we've planted quite a few fruit trees around our farm just for windbreaks and stuff, and June berries are the best because when I'm working the trees in the summer, you just eat and eat and eat and eat. We've tried some pear trees and some apple trees and all sorts of them, I guess, and they seem like they're all doing well. We're up the coldest part of the state up in the northeast corner, so winter kill gets to be kind of an issue. But overall, trees are doing pretty good up in that area.
Well, good. Thank you for. So we'll move to the end here, and we have, Ben, yes. Ben and Misty Draxton, and they have a cattle operation, and they've implemented rotational grazing, and they read in their documentary they have 21 paddocks so far, and they're growing that, which is excellent. And one of the things he's noticed is he's building more resiliency in his system, which I would be the first one to admit that is a great thing, and you would see that. So I actually put an asterisk by you, Ben, because I was hoping that you'd be here, and so no pressure. But I really want to hear your story because I correlated the picture and your youth and this grazing system. I'm a rancher at heart, so.
Well, I'm from eastern North Dakota by Grand Forks. My grandpa had a feedlot there, and I started working there in about 2010. I wasn't really that interested in animals growing up. I just played sports and did that stuff. But I thought raising cattle sounded so great, so I started doing it and started working for my grandpa, and then he sold me some pasture land kind of by Grand Forks in 2014. And then I guess it just started with that. I liked the grazing part of it more than he had a feedlot, but I really enjoyed the grazing part. And then I just kind of started by going into the NRCS office and talked to Kevin, and I wanted to get some water out to a pasture, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And I do think things have improved, and I've tried it so many different ways, grazing. I've learned a lot. Like every year I come into wondering how it's going to look next year, and it seems to always work out however I do it, but I I'm good at mixing it up because I never keep really just, there's no plan, so. Just go next where I think I should go, but no, it's been a lot of fun and I enjoy it.
No, I was going to say that. He's in the part of the world where obviously that annual cropping and thing is king, and you're got a grazing system and that. Did I read somewhere too that, are you Enoch Thorsgaard's grandson?
Yep.
Does that make sense? Okay. And I knew your grandpa and he was quite a individual in the Stockman's Association world and that. So I recognized the name right away. But yeah, right, you're having fun with it, obviously. So moving forward with more pastures, you're thinking more rest and recovery, or?
I think the thing I would like, I'm not 100% sure about how more pastures I want to do because it is real flat and alkali there, and so I am a little nervous about really locking them tight because I have wrecked some stuff if it's if it's a little wet, but it's been dry the last few years and that's helped a lot out there. But I think the biggest thing that I could improve the most would be getting more to one herd. I've done some custom grazing and my cows and different groups of cows, and so I'd like to get to more one herd, I guess, probably next, and then maybe start splitting up paddocks more, maybe. But.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. I'm anxious to hear what Alan's got to say, and hats off to you. I mean, I just enjoy hearing about that kind of stuff, so. Pardon?
Yeah, and he's my sister, yeah.
It's like a family reunion here. Well, I appreciate the informalness. This is what we like. We like people to be comfortable and speak and interject, and that's important for the group. So this next individual is the Brumbaugh Tree Farm, right? And if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Sure. My name is Craig Brumbaugh. My wife is not here today, so I can say anything I want. Because she just stepped out to do some shopping across this, but she'll probably come back and truth my story here. But at any rate, I had come to North Dakota sight unseen back in 1989. In the middle of a blizzard. I was second guessing my decision to come to North Dakota, but as like I say, I did meet my wife here. I love North Dakota. I grew up in New Jersey. I got my schooling at Colorado State in Fort Collins, and the communities here, the people, the reality of here is I told, the first week I was here, I said I was going to spend my rest of my life in North Dakota, just because of the change of people that I saw here. But at any rate, the first couple of mentors that I started with North Dakota Forest Service up in Walhalla. And there's some really sandy ground in Walhalla. And I heard stories of people on highly erodible land that would just blow. And Walhalla would fill up with dirt, before they started putting in windbreaks. And that really struck hard with me. And so I'm a tree lover for sure, but I could see trees working in North Dakota in a real way, in a very important way, to protect that land and keep it in place. And I got asthma too, and I tell you, when the dirt starts to blow and the smoke comes from Canada, I got health issues. So that's another reason I like trees. At any rate, I work with the North Dakota Christmas Tree Growers Association with the Forest Service. And they were a group of just really great people to work with. I don't know if you ever heard of that organization or association before or not, but they were spread out at one time throughout this North Dakota and centered in the northeastern part of the state, but they had growers all over the state. And growing Christmas trees and protecting the soil are two things that meant a lot to me. And there's a couple of mentors that I should mention that were part of that association that really helped me along in my efforts. And one is John and Margaret Page. And they were at the time the largest Christmas tree grower in North Dakota. And they had, I think it was Margaret that got the idea, his wife, to John, to take some of this highly erodible land that they crop with a small grain operation and try to grow evergreens on it and see if they would make Christmas trees. So Johnny Page took that to heart, and he planted little groves of Christmas trees, or tree evergreens, that he was hoping to make Christmas trees all over the Pembina County. And mine was just one small grove of probably 20 or 30 that he planted, and distributed Christmas trees all throughout the region. The other person that meant a lot to me in the Christmas Tree Growers Association was Skip Kochman. And I don't know if anybody remembers Skip, but he was a supervisor in Pembina County. He was also the RCD coordinator. But he talked about the 3 legs of conservation. And the one leg would be that it has to be economically feasible, anything you do. And I tell you, my wife has good control of the checkbook, and any expense I have, she looks at it and makes sure what I do is economically feasible. So she got that one leg taken care of. The other leg that Skip would talk about would be, it's got to be environmentally friendly and sustainable that way. And so I do a lot to try to diversify John. John had most of his trees were, what was saleable in that time was Scotch pine and blue spruce. Well, we've learned that we need to diversify that operation. We added Black Hill spruce. We also added balsam fir. We added white pine. Now recently Meyer spruce. And I think that has helped both with marketing and also improving soil health to have a mixture of trees. We've added pollinator plantings to that too. I guess to keep it in balance is important, I believe, because I have a deer problem. And I can spend 10 years every year trimming my trees, and a deer can ruin a tree in 1 year.
Yeah.
And I've had issues, with this, and I try to keep as much balance in the habitat to make it friendly for deer and friendly for Christmas tree production at the same time. So that's kind of the thing. And the third part that Skip would talk about is make it socially sustainable. And so I try to do environmental programs. I have this the ecology class come out and experience my production. I have the homeschoolers out. I do as much as I can for the next generation to promote conservation. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
Okay. Well, thank you for all of your stories, and again, very interesting. Let's bring Alan up and see if if he'd like to elaborate on some of the things that he heard. I'd be interested in hearing what he has to say, and we'll turn it over to Alan till we get to our next group.
So several things that struck me. First, diversity. Okay, all of you that were talking about putting in trees, you're putting in more than one species. So you're planting diversity in there, and diversity out of the 634, the 6 principles of soil health. Remember, diversity is one of the key principles, right? Diversity is one of the 3 rules of adaptive stewardship, and diversity is one of the 4 ecosystem processes. So diversity is absolutely crucial when we want to build ecosystems, we want to build productivity, profitability, those types of things. So I heard that. Secondly, habitat. So you're providing a lot of habitat for beneficials. And, so trees aren't just for birds to come roost in, nest in, all of that. Yeah, you're attracting different species of birds, but you're also attracting a lot of different insects as well. So you're providing a lot of additional habitat. Now, on the cropland that is directly adjacent to the trees, when you were talking about that, I think your brother-in-law or somebody is farming that, you really need to be taking advantage of that. I'm not sure how they're farming the cropland, but what I can say very definitively is that if they are farming the cropland with an emphasis on the 6 principles and trying to farm it regeneratively, those trees being there are highly beneficial in that regard. They provide a lot of mycorrhizal benefits, a lot of other microbial benefits, as well as harboring beneficial insects and the birds that prey on pests that may want to prey on those crops. So I like that part as well. So it can benefit the cropping that's going on there. So there's a lot of good things that I heard you say in that regard. Now I'll also say if my choice was between living in New Jersey and North Dakota, yeah, I'd choose North Dakota too. So, sorry for anybody whose home is New Jersey, but to me that's a pass-through state. A lot of people talk about North Dakota or the Midwest being a pass-through state. See, I think New Jersey is just a pass-through state. Okay? So good on you to move to North Dakota. On the cattle, mostly cow-calf, or are you doing yearling, or?
Mostly cow-calf.
Okay.
Some yearlings.
So I heard several things there. First of all, the fact that you're breaking it up into more and more paddocks. Now, what I would say is going forward, I would not invest any additional dollars into permanent fencing, and I would use temporary fencing for any additional paddocking that you're going to do. Because as you move forward, too much permanent interior fencing actually becomes a detriment, not a benefit. Because as you really learn how to graze your property and all of that, and you begin to develop resiliency, you begin to develop more diversity, more biomass production, those types of things, then you want to be more flexible in what you're doing there in grazing. So you want to be able to just put in temporary paddocks and use those, because what you'll find over the years is where you build a paddock, the size you build that paddock, the direction of the paddock, the configuration of the paddock, all will change, and it needs to change, as you read your landscape. Now, the other thing is observation. So, and this is true for all of you, okay? So observation is one of our biggest friends. And so spending time, taking time on our farms, on our ranches every day to really, really observe what is going on is absolutely critical. And that's observing with all of our senses. So watch, for the cattle, watch what the cattle are doing, how they're grazing, what do the manure pats look like, what does the gut feel look like on those cattle every day, what does their health and body condition look like. Observe whether, keep track of the diversity in what's growing out there. Are you seeing additional diversity come in? And this is for all of you, because as you plant trees, that's also going to stimulate different things in the seed bank, okay? In terms of grasses, forbs, and those types of things to grow. So pay attention to additional diversity that's coming in your observation. The other thing is pay attention to the insects, the pollinators, the birds that you're seeing. They're all key indicator species. So the more beneficial insects, the more pollinators, the more birds you see, particularly not just in numbers, but also species, that's an indicator you're doing things well, okay, and you're making progress. But then each of you use your shovels, okay, And I like to use what I call a sharpshooter or a spade to, dig in the soil, keep track of what's going on. And do it now and take pictures. And this is for everybody. Take a spade or a sharpshooter. And when Jay picked me up at the airport yesterday, I smiled because as I opened the back door of your pickup to put my luggage in, your shovel was right there. Okay? Now, Jay had better had a shovel in his truck, but all of us need to have a shovel, okay, and use them very routinely. And because, again, that quote I gave this morning about the land does not lie, it bears a record of what men write on it. When we stick a shovel in the ground, it's a testament to what's going on, good or bad, but it's a testament. So use the shovel routinely, take pictures, because our minds often don't remember exactly what things look like, and then you can monitor and track progress over time with what's going on. And one more quick thing with the cattle. So adaptive grazing is critically important. Resist the urge and temptation to get into prescriptive type systems there. I loved what you said about combining your herds. That's really important. The fewer herds you can have, the better you can manage everything. Okay, and the better your labor allocation, all of that. But we have a lot available on our website, and for all of you, a lot's available on understandingag.com, webinars, articles, podcasts, videos, those types of things. So, and we actually have an adaptive grazing course. So take advantage of that. But good job, guys. Thank you.
Everybody's got a shovel in their pickup here to get out of the snowbank.
Well, let's give these guys a hand for stepping forward. Area 1 had to go first last year too, and I'll have to switch. If we continue to do this and I'm allowed to do it, I'll switch it up and maybe we'll let Area 5 go, because it's never easy to get out of the gate. But we appreciate you guys coming forward first. And so next, moving along, we'll move into Area 2. And I don't know, is anyone from Cass County here besides the achievement winner, the Scott and Cedar House? Okay. Griggs County, Andre and Stacy Erstead, I believe, are they with us? They were at the luncheon or not? They don't, sitting quietly. The James River SCD, Nate Sand. Is Nate here? Would you like to come up, Nate? Sure, appreciate that, thank you. We'll go through the list here. We have Lemoore County, Rusty and Renee Schultz. They're not here, thank you. And we have Ransom County, which is Bowling Farms. Are they here? The Richland County SCD, Delshane and Sarah Klug. Are they here? Would you like to come up? Thank you, appreciate that. Steele County SCD. Anyone from Steele County? And Rosedale Farm and Wild Rice SCD. Anyone from here? Would you like to come forward? Well, thank you very much. So we have, Wild Rice, I had a few notes. Involved in planting cover crops and putting some of your land back into perennial vegetation, which if you come to the Minokan farm, one of the things that you'd hear Jay and the team talk about a lot is how perennials build soils. And so that's just my observation, just when I read through your bio, which is a great thing. And then we have Nate Sand and his family. And again, I apologize because I didn't know Nate was on the list, but I'll tell you what, why don't we just start on the end with the Rosedale Farm, and then we'll move into Nate and, Delshane. And if you would like to start? Tell us a little bit about what goes on at Rosedale Farms, and again, congratulations on all three of you being Achievement Award winners, so.
All right, thank you. My name is Marcia. I farmed with my dad, Dale, for many years. I have two sisters, and all three of us were supposed to be named David, but didn't get a David, so ended up being us girls. Anyway, my dad's name was Dale, and my mom's middle name was Rose, and so when the next generation took over and formed a partnership, that's how we came up with our name. I have kids that are not interested in the farm, but I do have nieces and nephews that are. So my sister and I are together, and we are helping the next generation. So that we probably aren't going to be increasing land at the way the prices have been going. So what we need to do is make the best out of what we have. And we did put in grass waterways, so we don't have to keep cleaning the ditches. And one thing I hate is black dirt in the ditches. I can't stand it. In the wintertime, so we need to do something about that. And so we started, we were in the CSP program, I think, for about 10 years, learned lots of different practices, like I said, the grass waterways, cover crops. Every year we have cover crop. And the cover crops, if they don't get touched, they might be there 3 years from now. I can be in a field that we planted 3 years ago, combining it, and I'll see the radishes and the turnips are still growing. So I think that's a great thing. Lots of trees. We plant as many different types of trees that we can. For our family, we have 3 separate farmsteads, and we've regenerated most of them so far. Anything else, Phil? No? Okay.
Well, thank you. Delshane, or go ahead.
Well, I'm Delshane Kluge. I grew up in Hankinson, North Dakota. My farm is actually about halfway between Hankinson and Fairmount. Grew up on my dad's family farm south of Hankinson. And my dad was one in the area probably to do a lot of experimenting over the years, and kind of, a lot of the things he kind of stumbled upon. It was he was trying to attempt in the early 90s to do some ridge till, and it was tough with all the wet years that they had down there. They had to kind of pull away from that. Ended up getting into a no-till drill one time, and not necessarily wanting to no-till, but out of desperatity because it was wet, they just went and started seeding beans in the corn stalks, and it worked, and kind of stumbled upon it, and just things kind of went from there. I myself in high school graduated in like '03. I went off and started working road construction for a few years, but always kind of came back and helped on the farm for harvest and planting. In 2015, had an opportunity to rent some acreage and buy a farmstead. And then when I came back, we kind of started looking at some of these ideas. Well, maybe we should try some strip till. Well, maybe we should try doing a little more no-till in corn, or took advantage of an EQIP program and kind of jumped headfirst into a lot of that, and there's been a lot of learning, and there's been a couple ups and downs, and like I said, some of the greatest things is narrowly separated from some of the worst things we've had too, so. But no, in the end, I mean, we've been doing a lot of those things now for 7, 8, 10 years, some continuous no-till and some stuff, and strip till, and I mean, some of the things that we see right happening on our land that's happening across the fence line, water standing on one side of the road versus the other side of the road, it's not there, and lots of other little things. I mean, it's impressive, and it kind of keeps you driving forward, even though, I'm always finding places where I got to try to find something better to do, but that's kind of the story, so.
Thank you. Nate?
I'm Nate Sand. I'm from Ellendale. And we do a wide variety of things, I guess, at the farm, ranch, and trees. Just a kind of quick snapshot of things. Started no-till, my dad did several years ago. And nobody else really, but some neighbors were, some weren't, and I kind of questioned it. Well, make a long story short, the chisel plow got a flat tire one day, and I think it's been 3 row now for 10 years. So, flat tire's still not fixed. And it's, like I said, with the blowing dirt, you see some fields blowing and blowing and blowing, and, your fields are, it's, free dirt day, like one neighbor says, for everybody else, so. And then we do some prescriptions with the fertilizer and some seed and stuff. The farming's kind of the farming part or whatever. The fun part's the ranching, the trees. I guess just a quick story. James River Soil Conservation, Renee Slosher and Nicole have been great, and Andy Wirtz. Kind of got started with CSP, then transitioned into the trees there. And working with them, we got a bunch of trees planted, shelter belts. Some sands like trees, some sands didn't. And I guess we're the ones that like them now. We're starting to put them back into place. Trees that got ripped out, 30 years ago. You wish you would put them in 20 years ago. But kind of quick story, my kids, they didn't play baseball this summer. So I said, oh yeah, you guys are going to be pretty busy now. Whenever they'd see someone, oh, how's your summer going, boys? Well, pretty good. What are you doing? Well, we're watering trees and pulling weeds. So I think they were kind of wondering about their decision, but I said, in the future, hopefully someday, your kids will benefit from it. Hopefully shoot a deer or a pheasant or watch one like I kind of like to do now. So we put in several trees, my dad's farmstead and then at the farmstead we're on, and also we'll use that. The fences that went back in, not permanent fences, we've done electric fences. They were ripped out several years ago as it was farmed kind of end to end some land, and now we've replaced that and we use corn stalks. We graze them as much as we can. Cover crops we've implemented in the low ground. As we're always wet in the spring, it seems like it in my area, and then we dry out in June and July, and it's been very beneficial. Like she mentioned, even this year, I noticed around some slough holes that were watered in the spring. I went out there in this fall, we're combining, and geez, there's radish, turnips, peas, and it's amazing that's grown back. They were full of water. So yeah, we just seen many benefits, and it's just been enjoyable watching the transformation and some of the wildlife come in. Our biggest problems are probably dogs and deer. So I don't know which one. The dogs chase the deer away, and then deer eat the tree. So I don't know if you got a fix for that, what to do. But anyway, that's overall though it's been fun. It's kind of been a family project. Just plugging away at things so it gets everybody involved.
Thank you for that. I always ask ahead of time, but can I use that sometime in the future, that free dirt day thing? I mean, I'll give you credit for the quote, Nate. I'm writing it down. That's going to come in handy someday. That free dirt day, I like that. Yeah. Unfortunately, we tend to have too many free dirt days sometime, and I think that's what we're all working towards. And listening to all three of your stories, you've got a legacy of things that are going on with Rosedale Farm there. I mean, you've got generations and relatives involved. You're seeing the benefits of the cover crops and the perennial vegetation and what that can provide for you from a soil health aspect. Delshane with the strip till and the no-till, there's a progression to all this, right? It's a journey, and we need to talk about that more, and it's the human aspect of the journey. And, it takes time. We don't want to jump in wholeheartedly all the time into these things, and that's understandable. And then, of course, Nate, it sounds like to me like you're putting that farm back together to its original intent with fences. You're going to have fence lines. You're going to have trees back in there. I talk about this a lot, and you'll hear it from lots of others. This simplifying the landscape thing has not been a good thing for us. And I can talk all day on that, but, we need to get back to some diversity and create some of these things and structures and trees, of course. We deal with this in Burley County, and I'm sure many of you others do too, as far as this taking out of the trees. We used to take the trees out and then put them back. But then now for the last 10 to 15 years, we're just taking them out. And again, we've simplified the landscape. But I don't need to stand up here and talk. I'd much rather listen to Alan, and I think we'll bring Alan forward and see what he's got to say after what he heard.
So some really very good things that I heard out of this group. One thing for the young generation coming on, make sure that y'all have a really solid, and you may already, make sure you have a solid succession plan in place. That's critically important, and I see way too many farms, way too many ranches lost because of the lack of a succession plan. So, you know, with that young generation coming in, they need to feel secure in that regard and not be turned on each other, you know, because of the lack of that. The second thing is get them to Soil Health Academy, okay, if they haven't been. We've got a lot of scholarship dollars. So that would really benefit them and help provide them with a broader, stronger network as well as a lot of really, you know, hands-on training. So that will be good for them as they're coming up. I like that I heard all the different things relative to diversity. You know, we talked about that with the first group, but again, I cannot overemphasize the importance of that. I also liked the fact that each of you do recognize, and you said it, Darrell, that, you know, this is a journey. You know, and regenerative ag is that. We say that all the time. It's a journey, not a destination. The truth is, not a one of us knows what 100% regenerated soil looks like. We've never seen it, and we never will see it, okay? But we know what's better. So keep working towards what's better. The other beautiful thing about regenerative is that, you know, unlike transitioning to organic or something like that, with regenerative, all of our tools are still in the toolbox. So if we're needing to use, you know, some type of minimal till, you know, applications right now, that's okay. You know, it's not taboo, okay? All the tools are still in the toolbox. We just need to do two things. We first need to ask ourselves, if a tool has the potential to do some destruction or damage, do we really need to use it at this time? And if we do, okay. But ask yourselves that first. And then secondly, make sure you have a plan to follow through so that you're following the use of that tool with regenerative principles and practices. And then the third thing that I would mention is for each of you, go back home and score yourselves, and then do this routinely on the 6 principles and the 4 ecosystem processes. So how well are you implementing the 6 principles in just base, you know, score yourself against yourself, okay? Don't compare yourself to others, but just yourself against yourself. How well are you implementing the 6 principles, and keep doing that so that you keep progressing. And then how well are you capturing the 4 ecosystem processes? You know, sunlight, water, minerals, diversity. So great job, guys.
Let's give these guys a hand. Appreciate you all coming up. So we'll move on to Area 3. And we have Burke County. And that is Barry and Lori Johnson. Are they with us today? Oh, I seen Barry this weekend in Fargo. And are you willing to come up, Barry? We'd certainly appreciate it if you did. Yeah, I seen Barry at the Harvest Bowl this weekend. Is Divide County here, perchance? Anyone from Divide County like to come forward? Montreal, North McHenry, Pierce, Renville County. Jeff, are you here? Okay. Rolette County, Paul and Diane Overby, are they here? Paul? South McHenry, we have Jason and Darcy Sheely. Are they here? Okay. And then we have Ward County SCD, Jamie and Nikki Johnson. Come on up, Jamie. Appreciate it. So just a little bit about Barry and Lori Johnson's I took away. Have implemented a lot of water pipelines and things for distribution of water. Some cross fence put in, if they could talk a little bit about that. They've used the cover crops as a bridge between their cropping and grazing system, which I think in the ranching realm, I think it's just a spot on thing to do. It serves as the bridge. That's a term I learned from the late great Ken Miller. Many of you remember Ken, and he used that. And they're wintering their cattle on the cropland. Again, a biological ag waste system, if you will, if it's out there. All good things. And then we have Jamie and Nikki Johnson. I noticed they have a very diverse crop rotation, which again, Alan has emphasized it, diversity, the cover crops, no tilling. They have their eye on water infiltration, right? Which is really important. And they also do some winter feeding on their cropland, which again is a plus. But I'm going to turn it over to you two guys. Either one of you want to start and just tell us a little bit about what you got going, and then we'll hear from Alan. So both excellent Achievement Award winners, very deserving. Glad that you were up here. So.
Thank you. It's getting lonely up here. We farm geographically where the Coto ends. I mean, backyard is a hill, and the front yard's the cropland. So anyway, I've tried to be diversified over the years. Mark Crosby's got me into a whole lot of programs. But we started out with CSP probably, and dividing the pasture into lots of cells, so rotational graze. And I try to incorporate the cattle and the farming as much as possible. And that's a lesson learned, I guess. Because of the Coto Hills, the water tends to go down into the subsoil and then come out where it can reach a lower level. It comes out, it's close to the surface, so it comes out there. So we've got seeps and some saline and tough ground to work with on our crop ground. So anyway, the bottom line is with the cattle, I rotational graze. I kind of have a plan, but some of that, we have very poor border fences, and sometimes that's determined by when the neighbor moves his cows in. And so I try and move mine away from them. Anyway, but yeah, I'll do the judging the grass quite a bit too. And then as far as controlling the seeps, I think that's where I probably got started, because I planted the side hills into alfalfa. Somebody told me that if you go down and infiltrate, get that water used up before it gets there, you heal it up. Well, there's ground that when I started, I mean, you could dump a bag of flour out there and you never find it. It's so white. And that, you can't find a lot of those areas anymore. That alfalfa program really helped, which now I've broke it up quite a bit since then. And then, like I try and crop, when I do crop, I diversify it with cropping cover crops now. And so I'll turn around and I'll raise cover crops for a couple of years, and I've kind of found out if you do it too long, you build up a weed presence. And so if you crop a couple of years, clean up your ground, then come back with more cover crops. And I'm kind of unlucky from the standpoint that we've got 4 quarters divided by 2 highways. And so what's on my side, I can crop and use with cows, and then the other side, I can't integrate cattle very well. And so if I do haul manure, I haul it out to the ones away from home, and then I try and feed on the fields and get the manure spread out there. I don't have to haul much manure that way. And I'm lucky from the standpoint that a water source and shelter, if it gets tough, they can come back into the yard. But I try and keep them out there as much as you can. What else? I guess Yeah, the cover crops, another, just I try and raise my feed on those quarters where we spread manure, get away from the cows, and then bring it back. And probably should be distributed a little better, but the manure goes back, we do. Yeah, I try and use cover crops for feed as much as possible. And I've done different things. One of the latest ones I guess I've tried, and it's a neighbor's idea, but it works real good, is sweet clover on a limited basis. Oh, sweet clover on a limited basis. Seed it with millet the first year, and you'll get a limited amount of sweet clover in there, and then next year it comes back as sweet clover, and you get a good crop. And you're building up your nitrogen, you're breaking up your roots, you're bringing a lot of your minerals back up and your nitrogen. So that's one that's worked pretty good. I probably think of more later, but no.
Hi, I'm Jamie Johansson. Me and my wife Nikki farm by Ryder, North Dakota. We raise cattle and many different crops and alfalfa and different hay crops and cover crops. And we do rotational grazing too. I've noticed when I do it, it really helps the ground, but I should do it more. I know I should, because I've seen the benefit when I do it. The cover crops really have helped with the saline issues. I've noticed the big white areas in the field getting smaller when we do a good job with cover crops. It'd be nice if we had more time in the fall for the cover crops to grow. But again, with cattle, we could do season-long cover crops. When we were told we won this award, I told the guy that I think I won the award for the amount of things that I want to try and not for what I'm already doing. But no, it's fun to watch the different things, and I would encourage anybody to try new things because it's fun to watch, and work with your soil conservation board. We have a wonderful board and just great guys to work with. I'd encourage anybody to try it. So, thanks.
Probably one more thing that I could add that I've done recently, that's my latest idea. In our native range, so to speak, pastures tend to dry up, and our plants, there isn't much out there in the fall, or even if there is, if the nutrition quality isn't good. And so instead of grazing the cows for 5 months on the continuous, I've added a few more cows and grazed it 4 months. Well, then that last month, when they normally would be getting run down and whatnot, I put them out on cover crop. And so they've got way better nutrition, and calves come in good, cows come in good, and they don't start out in a hole
Right.
for the winter.
Kind of like a pre-weaning program. Yeah, I've dabbled with that a little bit at home myself, and it does work. You get a nice flush on them. But I'll tell you, let's hear what Alan's got to say from these two individuals. And one thing I failed to ask, if any of you have any questions of these guys out in the audience, would certainly entertain that and appreciate it. And that's my lament for not bringing that up sooner. So feel free to raise your hand or ask a question, and I will certainly repeat the question. And yes, right away.
The native grass I would ask this, all native grass, how do you restore it, once the cattle eat? I mean, it seems like it disappears at the end of the year, or, even in August, early August.
I think we've got a lot of probably bromine stuff out there too, which just seasonally, it's not the time of year that it grows good. But native, period, yeah. No, I think it just literally, in our country, we run out of moisture towards fall. Our seasonal precipitation is generally in June. And so I think it just runs out of steam towards fall, yeah. And so, like I said, I'm in a cattle, I like cattle. Anyway, the bottom line is I used to weigh the calves when I vaccinated, probably 1st October or so. And then you kick them back out thinking, well, it's 2 weeks and I vaccinate them again, and they go out back out. And it always wind up being a month or so because you get busy combine or something else. And I'd weigh them again and they wouldn't weigh anything. I mean, they'd weigh the same. A few of them would gain, a few of them would lose. They'd basically hold their own if you was lucky, and the cows would get run down. And that's kind of how I come up with the concept of getting them out of there in the fall.
Any other questions for these two before we bring Alan back up? Alan, you got a few things?
On your native, what's there? Whoever asked that question. Yeah, what you got? What's growing? Yeah. Yeah. Right, right. Okay. So, one of the things that we see today, and this is where we have to be very careful not to limit ourselves and limit our thinking, and right, right, right. But we, one of the things that we do is we spend a lot of time studying what we call historical ecological perspective. And that's going back much further in time and looking at, what was there pre-farming, pre-ranching, and those types of things. Here in North Dakota, I mean, there's been, rangeland now documented with more than 150 species growing. So a lot of, okay, so you do have some good diversity, all right? And so in those situations, diversity again matters a lot to extend that grazing. And that's diversity in grasses, forbs, legumes, all of those types of things. Relative, again, heard a lot of good things here. 2 or 3 things come to mind real quick. One is, as you rotate and you move and all of that, again, be mindful that you don't get trapped into a prescriptive mindset of how you graze, that, well, I'm just doing it this way all the time, right? And that's easy for all of us to do. That's a human tendency. So just be mindful that as you're continuing on your rotations, that you mix it up. And those disruptions, those rules of disruption that I talked about this morning, take advantage of those and plan, pre-plan on, okay, what kind of disruptions can I introduce on all of your paddocks. Again, as I said earlier, for Ben, I would not continue to put in any permanent fencing because, again, permanent fencing will get in your way as you progress, and it'll also limit you, and it'll cause you to be prescriptive in nature. It almost forces you into that. So be very careful not to add too much permanent interior fencing as you go. The other is water. Water is always an investment and not a cost. So I like, that y'all have invested in water, things like that, but I hear way too many people talk about, well, I can't adequately graze this section of my ranch because I lack water. Well, that's a whole section of your ranch you're not making an impact on. So even in the desert, we put water in there so that we can graze everything. So I've never, ever not made water investment not pay, and not pay very quickly. So if you're grazing well and you're grazing adaptively, water investment will always, always pay for itself. So thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Moving into Area 4. I don't believe our Burley County people are here. They're going to be here after a bit, but they're not here. Cedar SCD. Is anyone from Cedar here? John and Ashley Schieffer. Emmons. Okay, Paige. The Mack Ranch from Kidder County. I seen Corey around, but is he here? Okay. Oliver County, Darren and Sarah Cargis. They're not here, okay. Sheridan County SCD is here. I know that. I talked to him earlier. Chad Meyer. Chad, can we get you to come forward? South McLean SCD. Yeah, come on forward. Thank you. And that's Alan Esslinger. Stutzman County SCD, Fletcher Farms. Dana? Thank you, Dana, for coming. I texted Dana, congratulations this morning. I didn't realize he was the winner from Stutzman County. And we have West McLean, Brenda Users. Is Brenda here? Well, I guess we'll start off, you know, obviously with Chad, I'm familiar with Chad. Maybe he'll tell his story. He's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employee and has really facilitated a lot of grazing systems within the state of North Dakota. And he really should be commended for his work. He's tireless in his efforts to do that. He's really, and I was happy to see that he was an award winner from his county. He is a private landowner as well, and he's doing some really good things up there with fencing and water developments. He did tell me a story this morning, though. He said he's getting kind of old. When he builds new fence, he can't bend down anymore. And I just was like, wow, how hard can that be? I bend down all the time. But no, I really don't. I feel Chad's pain. I'm worse, actually. I actually crawl to the next post so I don't have to get up. That's kind of how I do it. But and so we're glad Chad is with us. And then Dana Fletcher. Again, Dana is moving forward with the planting green concept, and I sure hope he talks a little bit about that, because he's really got it down to a science, I believe. We've been out on Dana's place, and he's again doing it in an area that's probably not what you'd think that, you know, the other folks are doing. And so if you were to fly over his place in the spring, it would be all green. And he's kind of an oasis of green when most things are black. So, but I'm anxious to hear from each one of them, and you guys can, whoever would like to start first, and then we'll hear from Alan. So don't be shy, Chad. Just be a leader, and it's okay.
Nothing like being caught off guard when you run into Daryl. So yeah, I guess I'm 19 years into owning my property, 18 years into management. First 4 years, spent scared to death of the banker. I did not kick off the previous renter. We went forward with a pretty traditional season-long system. I was unhappy pretty much every fall because everything was absent other than air. And we had brush that the cows didn't eat, but otherwise it was pretty void. We talked about rotation systems, pretty negative feedback from that particular renter. Best thing that happened was he wound up having some health issues, dropped me cold in the spring of 2008, and everything has just kind of snowballed from there. I've reseeded about 120 acres of brome, alfalfa, old CRP or W water bank into native grass. Went from 2 pastures to, I want to say, close to 12 to 16. I was trying to count because I wasn't prepared, so I don't know. I don't own a cow. I have good renters for the most part since that time. I have 2 different renters, and we are a little non-traditional in the fact most of my property is in the Game and Fish Plots program. They have an interest in having the habitat out there and the hunting access. I entered that program with one goal, with them knowing how their program worked, and I told them I'll do this, but we got to keep the cows on the property. That's worked very well so far. There's been very minimal feedback that's negative, I guess would be the way to put it. Most years I we have got cattle out there from sometime in April is the desired start until sometime in late June or early July. Because of the hunting access portion, we pull cattle off somewhere around there. As I've developed more pastures, we have been able to keep cattle longer, impacting a smaller area later into the season and still having good recovery. The amount of grass production has probably doubled, tripled, quadrupled since implementing the pastures. Amount of fence building has tenfold. I don't know where we're at. Most of my pastures range between 15 to 25. I think my bigger one is 40 acres. Of that 40 acres, half of that's probably water. Did do some shrub planting. Didn't plant trees, planted native shrubs. Got an 8-acre block that we put in 2009. Added an additional 2.5 acres to that this spring. Kind of a wildlife planting, almost all fruiting shrubs, with the exception, I guess, there are some cedar and juniper on the windward side, trying to create some windbreak for wildlife. There's a lot of things I'm forgetting. I've done a lot of work with all of the partners, I guess would be the way to put it, both state, federal, NGOs, done some wetland restoration work, pulled sediment out of those old cropped wetlands, put them back on the black dirt back on the hilltops. Got a few dams, did a solar pump system, put in some pipeline as well, and portable solar pump system that came with some challenges, but when it works, it's awesome. I guess that's what I can think of off the cuff.
Alan Esslinger, farm up by Cole Harbor, North Dakota, by the Big Lake, and I guess to start out with, I've worked with a pretty extensive cell grazing system, on a wildlife refuge up along the Big Lake, and kind of went from there. I did that out of necessity because we didn't have quite enough farmland. So as things progressed, we did, first time I worked with Dave was to put in some trees and extend the shelter belt around the farm. And later on, we went in the CSP program. And the thing was with that, we added some electronics to machinery to make it do what we needed it to do. And I was one, I could take apart a wristwatch and put it back together and make it work, but you add a wire to it, it just didn't add up, So a lot of phone calls to my son who had worked for John Deere at the time to get him to walk me through all of this and make the sprayer turn on and shut off as it needed to be and make the tractor auto steer down the field, and all that was kind of new to me. And we had quite a few crops. I stayed away from corn, but grew about everything else that they grow in the state, and through soil conservation, we needed to grow some deep-rooted crops, so we threw some canola in the operation and stuff. And we're seeing some real results because back when we had a conventionally tilled farm back in the 90s and made a slow switch to minimum tillage, and I don't know if you'd call it no-till, but a single pass seeding, in our operation, and seeing some real good results from it all.
Fletcher from Courtney, North Dakota, north of Jamestown. And I've probably been no-till for about 10 years and started planting rye as a crop, and came up, it was done with a hoe drill back then, and came up thin, so I had crop insurance release it, and there's quite a few acres there, and you know, there was half a rye crop, and the agent said, well, you know, I'll total it for you. And I said, well, I want to keep 60 acres for rye, and he didn't really want me to keep it because he was totaling it. So, and I said, well, if you total it, I'll plant the whole, you know, beans into it. And totaled it, and that worked out okay. And I planted soybeans, and we ended up getting 2 to 3 inch rains back to back, and so I didn't get it terminated. So it'd been 2 weeks, and then the very thin rye crop turned into a very thick rye crop, and it was as tall as my cap. And I'm not that tall, but that's tall for rye. And anyway, the neighbor did spraying for me, and they came in, and it was still too wet to spray, but I was worried about it, and so they sprayed it, and this is like 300 acres. It wasn't as small for me. And so we ended up, it took a long time for that to come down, and it came through, and I had a 50 bushel soybean crop, and so that made me get hooked on seeding beans into rye. And I also grow pinto beans, and they worked great with pinto beans, and I've done that for a couple of years. And then I read an article from eastern side of the state from NDSU that said you don't really want to plant pinto beans into rye. So I had to call and find out why you don't want to do that. But pinto beans aren't Roundup ready, but I do terminate before or during when I'm planting on those, because I wouldn't want to have that 2 weeks of rain either. But the weed control has been good. It's provides support for the sprayers and that kind of thing. But we've been getting such heavy rains that I've been strict no-till, but you know, it seems like you take one step forward and 2 steps back sometimes with these saturating rains. But certain fields are starting to getting the infiltration, but the infiltration is still poor, and we're poorly drained in our neck of the woods. But I had a fairly new rock picker, and I finally sold that a couple years ago because it's a brand new rock picker, and it's been sitting in the Quonset, never been used, and since I went no-till. So I guess use half the fuel with the no-till, and I mow the cattails down instead of burning all the diesel fuel, trying to disc them like I used to. And in the spring, the ducks don't know if I mowed it or ever been disced underneath them, so it's worked out good.
Thank you, guys. All three great stories. Is there any questions in the audience for these guys to start off? Go ahead, Keith. The question, I'll just repeat the question. The question is, Keith Kronberg asked him if he would plant corn into rye. Go ahead, Dana.
Oh, I just basically plant corn into the bean ground. I did fly on some brassicas into the soybeans as leaf drops, and been trying to get something green growing in the spring that way. Camelina was something I've tried in the past, and I've tried it again this year. We'll see what it does in the spring. You know, camelina can survive supposedly as good as rye, but the first year I tried it, it was so dry I didn't get much for a germination, although it did come up in the prevent plant for a couple years after that. But I have seeded rye after the corn's off, basically frost seeding, and this spring I had pretty good growth of rye. Last spring, a year ago, It was such a late spring, the rye was real small. It was spindly this year, but it was substantial enough that I thought it was worth it.
Rocky's got a question.
What kind of residue cover now are you seeing planting in rye? Is the rye older than the season winter or disappearing? Opposed to just
The question relates to how much residue Dana would have on his ground versus just planting a bean crop. So, go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, I've had a lot of residue. I'm noticing that it does disappear a lot faster now than what it initially first did. And I mean, I still have a pretty thick, I mean, when you have rye that tall, you're gonna have a mat of residue for a couple of years on it, but it breaks down faster now than initially.
Yeah, your system is working, and so it's using up that residue, right? And again, spent some time, had the pleasure of being out at Dana's place. He's got some soil aggregates going with that fibrous root of that rye. I have aggregate envy. It's nice, and I think it continues to get better. It's been a while since we've been there, but again, any questions for these guys? I have one for Chad, just quickly, but if someone else has one, yes.
How much growth you get on that rye, fall?
What's the growth on the rye if you frost seed it, Dana?
This spring it was, I don't know, it had to have been over a foot tall, but where I had a GPS skip in the corn, it was like massive thick, so the corn does keep the rye down, but if it gets to be if we could get warm temperatures in March like we sometimes do, I think you could get a really nice growth of rye. But no, it was probably starting to joint there, but I mean, I was probably seeding June 5th this year.
Questions? One thing I'd like Chad Meyer to elaborate on just a little bit, because I always tell people this, the ability or the time frame that we're in nowadays with the help of our partners that are available to help facilitate grazing systems, cover crops, other regenerative practices, if you will. These NGOs and partners, you want to talk a little bit about that, Chad? I mean, in my career or lifetime, I don't know if there's been a better time. And those people, they've been on board for a while now, and they're really helping to move this thing along. And Chad, of course, with what he does, and I'd just like him to elaborate a little bit on that, and then we can turn it over to Alan.
Loaded question there, Daryl. I said, that's quite the loaded question. It is unprecedented. The Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program is, I think, 35 plus years old now. But the NGOs and the way they've stepped up and have embraced working with the private landowners and are bringing assistance to the table financially, technically, should you decide to work with them on any project, really they're as invested in that as you are as the landowner. They want to see you succeed, I think would be probably the most honest way to say it. Whether that's a cover crop or a rotational grazing system or something in between, they're not out there. There's a lot of people, and you talked to Alan earlier this morning about fear. And I work with a lot of ranchers. I handle southwestern North Dakota. Work with a lot of farmers, ranchers, landowners, some recreation owners in the past, but nowadays it's more active operators. But that fear of what are you gonna require from me? What are you gonna take from my operation? You're gonna take my freedom to do what I want is huge in the general public, the general operations. And I don't know what drives that. I don't know what that background is or how that rumor mill gets rolling, but anyway, I've never seen that. If somebody has had that issue, I'd love to talk about that when it comes to these voluntary conservation programs. But yeah, I think those voluntary programs are here, those people are here, and I think they're invested in the long term in helping farming and ranching succeed in being profitable on the farm and ranch side, but also beneficial to the environmental side.
Thanks, Chad, for doing that. And one thing I would say too, from the technical expertise thing, I think these NGOs, these groups have really gone out and went over and above, I think, in not every instance, but in a lot of them. And I think that can be very helpful, the technical part of it. We see them a lot at the Minokan farm. I mean, you can talk to our team, and we see them at some of our events, and you see them at other events, and they're educating themselves. And so I think through an information and education thing, again, that's our primary emphasis in our county. It's a good thing to see. But with that, Alan, if you got a few things to add for these winners?
So a lot of good things. Alan, I heard you, sounds like you've got pretty good diversity in your cash cropping system, which I like quite a bit. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways to add diversity. And too many times we forget to add it into the cash cropping system itself. And we're seeing more and more narrowing of that in a lot of instances. So I like the fact that, you know, you're looking at diversity in that aspect as well. You know, I love planting green, Dana. You know, we do a lot of that, doing more and more of it, and we have a lot of the people that we work with doing that. The biggest thing on both what Alan and Dana are doing, and I encourage, you know, every farmer, the truth is you need to be doing your own research on farm. You know, don't bet the farm on things, but try things on your own. That's just so important, because having lived in that academic world as well, that university research world, you know, the truth is the way you have to do research academically is severely limiting relative to what you really need to know about what you can do on your own farms and ranches at landscape scale. So we've learned ourselves more and more, do your own little research, and I hear that from both of you. You know, you may not call it that, you may not be terming it research, but that is what you're doing. You're doing your own trialing to be able to determine what works. And that's the other thing about regenerative. Again, I keep harping on this, it's never prescriptive. And what works in one instance, like for planting green or what Alan's doing, you know, may not work in another instance. So you've got to always be experimenting and trying and looking at things. So I commend y'all for that. Chad, I get super excited about what grazing can do relative to developing wildlife habitat. We have seen, like on my own farms and many of our clients' farms and ranches, an incredible return of wildlife species, and especially ground nesting birds, all species, but especially ground nesting bird species. You know, for many decades, we were told that grazing destroys ground nesting bird habitat. Well, grazing done poorly can do that, absolutely, but grazing done well, grazing done adaptively, actually does the exact opposite. Like on our own farms, we have seen the return of quail, and we have many coveys of quail now where we went decades without quail at all, and they returned on their own. We're doing that with prairie chicken, and with other ground nesting bird species. Yeah, and it helps all of the other species, migratory birds, songbirds, you name it. Also, relative to you working with, a number of conservation organizations and all that, we have to, and we haven't had an issue. So we've worked extensively with Ducks Unlimited, with Trout Unlimited, with Audubon Society, and on and on. And we've had really good success in being able to partner with some of those organizations to be able to make significant progress. So thank you for what you're doing. I really like what this group up here is doing. I like the way that they're thinking, and the fact that they're not afraid to just tackle things and dive in and discover some things. So good job, guys.
Thank you guys again for coming on up. And we're kind of closing in. Moving into Area 5. And then we can have a wrap. We have, is anyone from Adams County here? Okay. We have Dunn County, Lauren Jensen. Is Lauren around? Golden Valley, SCD. Okay. McKinsey County, Russell Timrek, and are they here? They're not here today? Nikki? Maybe we could get Nikki up here. Or her group. We could bring the whole group up. Okay. See how I shut that down right away? I've learned over the years. Mercer County. Anyone from Mercer? Yes. Come on forward. Brendan Brinkman. And we have Slow Pettinger, SCD. Anyone? Yes, come forward. Thank you. And we have Stark Billings. Anyone from Stark or Billings County here? The Richard Family Farm. And Williams County. Anyone from Williams? Pardon? Okay. So we have Brendan and Julie Brinkman are with us today, and we have Russell, or excuse me. Okay, yes. Okay, Lance Olson, sorry, from Slow Pettinger. So I guess what we'll do is whoever would like to start, just go ahead and tell us a little bit about your operation, and congratulations on being the Achievement Award winner from your county. So whenever you'd like to go ahead, Lance.
Yeah, I'm Lance Olson from Hettinger County, and I guess I was a city boy, and I'm a first-gener farmer, so started 11 years ago. I guess I got into the CSP, did some grass seeding, saline seeps, buffers, variable rate, all sorts of stuff, food plots. I got big into the stripper header. Residue, I think, is a big key in our area and on our soils. Been through 2 or 3 of them, and yeah, I just believe in the stubble, and it's a big deal to canopy the ground and helps keep our weed pressure down and hold our soils. Rotation's been big on my farm, and yeah, I guess it's just been quite the journey, and it's been the programs that I got into have been awesome, and yeah, it's good stuff, so thank you.
Brinkman from Golden Valley, North Dakota. My wife and I were on a cow-calf operation, and unlike this fellow over here, my wife is here. She is responsible for about 90% of the day-to-day operations at our place. I have a day job, and so I work in the afternoons and the weekends. My dad won this award in 1983, and we run on part of the ranch that he initially bought in 1968. Like I said, we run a cow-calf operation. Our hay process, we have about 500 acres that we cut for hay most of the time. We run that on a rotation. Thank goodness, I'm not a farmer, so if there's any farmer questions, you'll have to give them to my neighbor. He's a young man that's very, very good at farming. They run a no-till operation, and so every year they take 100 acres or so of our hay ground and they break it up. Well, they don't break it up, they no-till it, and then we rotate that way. So we try not to run anything more than 8 to 10 years, but it depends on the productivity of that when we break it up. As far as our grazing operation, we probably have about, I don't know, 16 to 20 different cells. Our cells run from the smallest one being about 80 acres, the largest one just over 200 acres. We try to run 3 different groups of cattle that we rotate through those. Most of them are, well, I think all of them are fenced for tame ground and for native. And the way we rotate them is never the same. Sometimes, depending on in the spring, depending on what kind of moisture you get, a lot of times we'll try to get them out on the native right away. It's better than Scour's medicine. It keeps your calves healthy. We've had very good luck with that. Sometimes when it's real dry, we'll put them on the tame first because it's greener. Most of you know that some of that crested wheatgrass gets pretty tough if it gets very dry. So we do a lot of that. As far as water, in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, well, it's taken us 50 years probably on our places, but we have water in every single rotation. We've got fresh water in every rotation. We still do have a lot of dams. I'm not a big believer in fencing out the dams. I feel like sometimes when you don't have shade, you gotta have that to keep your cows cool. But we've been fortunate. The last few winters have been pretty hard on us in the spring, so we've moved our calving dates back to the middle of April. But we've maintained our weights, selling around the 1st of November, and I feel that's a lot to do with our grazing plan and our grazing rotation. Typically, we try to keep our pastures around 20 days. We don't ever chase cattle very seldom we chase cattle from one rotation to the other. We just open gates and they migrate that way, and then we close gates. And so all of our property is contiguous, so it's fairly easy for us to do that. So.
Very interesting. Lance, you're first generation. That's exciting. And it's exciting that you're an Achievement Award winner at this age. And I won't ask you how old you are because that's pretty personal, but I can tell you look pretty young. And so that hats off to you for that and what you do. Brendan, I think I see you in wing at the rodeo every once in a while, right? Yeah. Brendan is the senior men's breakaway roper. I've seen him lots of times over the years. I've been part of that we were 75 years in wing last year. It's a long time. Yeah, no, he wasn't at the first one. My grandpa was at the first one, so. 1982, that's a long time ago, yeah. But no, running an operation, Brennan brought up an interesting point about calving date, and we haven't really discussed that much, and moving towards what Mother Nature allows, and again, I think that's significant. And of course, when you move your calving date, you just there's lots of things that come with that, and I think he's got a realization with that, and I think I visited with lots of people about that over the years, and from my own personal experience of, you know, it's been significant, and from a labor standpoint especially, and coinciding with nature. But anyway, any questions for these two fellas? Two interesting Achievement Award winners before Alan? Yes, Keith. I guess the question, and I'll repeat the question for you, Lance, and it's a great one. Ask if being first generation, not having any preconceived notions or any peer pressure has helped him move down this road, and that's a great question.
I learned a lot of lessons the hard way.
Is your last name really Oswald then, or?
No.
That would fall right in line with.
Nah, I don't know. I guess I just learned from what I saw other people doing and took advice from some good people that pointed me in the right direction. And yeah, I guess I just kind of did it. And then what worked, because if it didn't, I would have to find something else to do. So yeah, we just made it work and tried to work with our soils. We got tougher soils, and that's where that Shelbourne or stripper header really shined for me. So yeah.
Questions for either one of these gentlemen before we turn it over to Alan? Yes, Keith.
You're with the gentleman from Golden Valley. You say you move about every 20 days. Is that a social deal, or do you think the deal is adequate? Why about that tendency on moves?
Well, it depends a little bit on the year too, but I think 20 days for us a lot of times gives a chance, and it depends on the size of the cell too, but on a typical cell that's maybe a quarter with 60 cows in it, it gives them time to cut the tops off or chew the tops off, and it doesn't ever, you know, we take a lot of pride in leaving grass. We have some of the best mule deer in the country on our place, along with, I think we have 3 different grouse leks on our place, and we've got lots of partridge and grouse, and so I think that's all due to leaving grass, standing grass. I guess my dad told me when I was a young man that what you see above the ground is what's below the ground, and so we've taken that to heart, and we try real hard not to overgraze, and thankfully we've had good moisture. You know, back here about 3 years ago, we had a really severe drought, and you know, we didn't have to sell many cows. You know, we were a little more selective in our culling, but a lot of the folks were dropping their herds by 30-40%, and we didn't have to do that because we had standing grass when the year started. And then my farmer neighbor there, he does a good job too with cover crops. We use cover crops in between when he gets done farming, and before we seed to alfalfa and grass, we'll put a cover crop in there to try to help the soil.
Alan mentioned before the possibility of moving every 4 nights a day, and you're talking 20 days, so what's the difference?
Well, our cells are probably a little bigger than what he's using. I don't know. For us to do that 4 times a day, I don't know if we have the resources to do that. It's just me and my wife. So.
Any other questions? We'll let Alan elaborate on that, because I think that's a great question, and I know he's got some insights into that. So I think we'll turn it over to Alan for our last group.
So Lance, first generation, and you know, we need a lot more of that, because most of us are folks my age, right? I'm 63, so we need We need young people getting into agriculture, and we need first generation. And what we find, and again, remember, we work with thousands of different farmers and ranchers, but a lot of times it's those first timers that really do a good job. You know, those of us that are, you know, I'm sixth generation, those of us that are multi-generation, all of that, sometimes, and you know, you mentioned it, but we come with a lot of encumbrances and traditions and culture and everything else that sometimes we need to break up a little bit. So it can be tougher though, you know, for guys like you that are just jumping in. So I commend you for that. And again, I'll also offer, you know, we've got tons of resources available. So take advantage of, you know, our website, again, at understandingag.com. We've just got a lot of stuff that's available there, I think, that could help you as you continue your journey. You said one thing that really piqued my attention quite a bit when you were talking about keeping the ground covered, keeping it armored, right? That's obviously one of the 6 principles, and absolutely, yeah, totally agree with that, and really commend you for, you know, that being foundational and part of what you do. So keep up the good work. Brendan, a lot of good things that I heard from you, and you know, one is you said it outright. You said that, you know, you don't have this set in stone grazing plan, that you do vary that plan. So you are adaptive in that regard. And, you know, so I like that. I like that a lot. You also talked about the fact that you had water in every pasture, every paddock. That allows you so many different opportunities, yeah, and to do your job very well when you're not water restricted. The other thing that you said was that you always try to leave plenty of grass behind. And I love that. And that's foundational for good grazing. And oftentimes I think we don't understand that concept well enough. You know, I hear way too many people say, well, there's still a lot of good grass left. I got to get it while it's there, right? And what we don't realize when we say that and we do that is that we are automatically limiting what can grow there from that point forward. So by always thinking about leaving some behind, what are we doing? We're supporting both the grass that is growing there and the other plants that are growing there. We're supporting the microbes up underneath the soil surface, keeping them active and vibrant and really cranking and cycling nutrients and water for us. We are also protecting those carbohydrate root reserves. So you will always grow more grass by leaving more grass. That seems antithetical to some people, but that is absolutely true. The only way to really grow more grass is to leave more grass after every graze. And then, you know, let me just give you a little bit of data on that. So one of my good friends, Dr. Richard Teague, who did he's now retired, but he did a career at Texas A&M, but he's done a lot of research all over the country, and one of the things he looked at was the amount of the plant that animals were allowed to graze before you move them on versus root die-off. And what he found after 3 decades of doing this research is that you can allow them to graze up to 50% of leaf volume and you have 5% or less root die-off. But the moment you step above that, if you go to just 60%, which to a lot of us seems like, well, it's just 10% more, how much of a difference it can make? Well, here's how much of a difference it makes. You go from 50% and 5% are under root die-off. If you let them take 60%, you now have 50% root die-off. And if you let them take more, you're up in 80, 90% root die-off. So what he's doing is he's making sure that he doesn't have all of that extreme root die-off to support that future growth going forward. So I really like that. And that pays off big. Now, relative to the question about days of time on a pasture or paddock and me moving, 4 times a day versus once every 20 days or whatever the case may be, remember, this is called adaptive grazing, not prescriptive grazing. Do I move every herd 4 times a day? No. Now, the herd I talked about on doing that this morning was my finishing herd. So I'll very briefly tell you that to get that very high degree of finish that we achieve, 90+% grade and choice and prime on grass alone, we do that, one of the ways we do that is by that frequent movement. And here's how that does that. So with every move I make, I entice them to eat more. So if I gave them the same amount of ground for that day, but only moved them once a day, they would actually consume less. That's reality. They will consume less, the same animals. But if I move them multiple times a day, every time I move them, that stimulates them to eat more. And remember, I showed Derek Smith's dairy there in Minnesota, and I said he moves them, his dairy cows 4 to 6 times a day. Again, to stimulate them to eat more. They produce more milk, and they'll marble up and grade better when I do that as well. But if I'm doing my cows, no, I'm not moving my cows 4 to 6 times a day. What I do, I'm moving them once every day or once every 2 days on my cows. But again, you do what's working for you. Okay, that's why it's called adaptive grazing. The other thing is, again, don't make that prescriptive. All right, if I want to come here for this conference and I'm personally not there to move cattle, well, I can build a paddock to hold them for 4 days, right? And not move them at all for those 4 days. So again, it's adaptive grazing, but we do have a reason behind everything that we do. And just in that, this eating stimulation, so we all just ate lunch, what, hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago? So, but if somebody fired up a grill back there and we could all smell some steaks grilling or hamburger grilling, even though we might think we're full right now, as soon as you start smelling that, you're hungry again, right? So if it works for us, it works for our livestock. So thank y'all. And good job, guys.
Well, folks, that touches on all of our area Achievement Award discussion. A couple things before we head out. Just, again, really appreciate being able to do this. I just totally enjoy meeting these people and hearing their stories and things like that. The other thing I would say, Alan Williams, what a job with this group today. A hand for Alan. Just spectacular, his insight and his power and his delivery. It's just a real treat, I believe. And finally, I think another huge round of applause for our Achievement Award winners, the guys that came up, the individuals, the families, those type people. They're the ones doing it. We do this to honor them, and we certainly appreciate what they did. And again, I know this from a lot of experience at the Minokan farm, and personally, it's not easy to come up and expose your operation or your family, even if it's a fine-tuned machine. And so hats off to those winners that especially came up here, and all the winners for that matter. And of course, tonight we're going to be recognizing them again, and certainly appreciate the time being spent with you guys today. So thank you very much.